Chai After Dark includes adult language and NSFW content. If you have auntie sensibilities or uncle sensibilities, this podcast may not be for you.
Hey party people, salam, namaste, and sasriyakal. We're back again with Chai After Dark. We're continuing our series Rewatch. Welcome to Chippendales, starring Kumail Nanjiani. This time, it's episode 4. Steve's new calendar flies off the shelves. Nick makes a pitch to New York investors. A snub from Steve provides Otis with a sobering wake-up call. Stay tuned, and as always, go to chaiafterdark.com. Happy New Year, and let's go.
So, Samim, tell us about how Luigi's on work release.
Man, can you imagine all the housewives calling his plumbing service? Like, that guy, he could do any job ever, really. He would have 4-year wait lists.
Dude, he should come out and start a Chippendales. He would totally be
He
rich.
would, as I would say, he would kill it.
He'd be like,
Ba-da-bum-bum.
do you want me to come over?
She didn't get it, dude. She didn't get it.
Lost.
I know, kill it. Okay, I get it. No, but I was going to say, can you imagine the number they would do? It'd be like, do you want me to come over and fix your pipes or something?
Anyway, hey, what's up, potty people? Welcome to the latest edition, the New Year's Eve edition of Chai After Dark. Chai.
Going dancing.
So how was Vancouver?
I went to Vancouver with Huma and Sami and Amaya. It was really fun. We flew there on Christmas Day. We had this like luxurious 4-course dinner.
Wow.
It was really nice. They brought out this like seafood tower for 4 because it was like a pre-fixed dinner. And Sophia, Maya, and Homa were like, I'm not eating this. So Sami and I finished entire seafood tower.
Why didn't they want to eat it?
It's like chilled oysters and mussels.
That's hella good,
and
dude.
Shrimp. And then after that, like I had prime rib. It was so festive. We have a picture too. Maybe we'll put it on the page feed. But we had our ugly sweaters, I would say, because the waiters and the runners of the food would come up to us and be like, oh my God, the whole family's dressed up with their ugly sweaters. And then Sami and I were like, we got these at Old Navy. They weren't meant to be ugly. They're meant to be normal Christmas sweaters. So then the girl was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You guys look so great. So yeah, that was Christmas. It was really fun.
Damage was done. Emotional damage.
Damage was done. Yeah. But I like that sweater so much. I wore it back on the flight yesterday from Vancouver. Yeah, I'm still in that theme. You know, it's New Year's Eve. It's still the holidays.
Nice. So I hung out with my mom a lot. So she came and she stayed with me and we watched The Glass Worker together, which we're going to have out next month. And then we just got to hung out and chit chat. I'm trying to think of like, what did we do that was actually fun? Not a whole lot.
Didn't you go out for champagne brunch? You and the mom? Didn't you guys have mimosas?
Whoa,
that's what you told me.
Whoa.
No, we went out to.
Sorry, I wasn't supposed to say it on the podcast. My bad. I'm sorry, Auntie. Sorry.
You know what you were supposed to say on the podcast is that I went to lunch at this Pakistani halal restaurant in Fremont on Christmas Day, and we had Irani chai and shawarmas and stuff.
Oh,
that's what you were supposed to say.
At a desi.
Yeah,
it's like.
No, I didn't do it with you. I did it with my family. And
wait, I thought we were.
It was like a chicken 65 roll.
The pod family.
When you hear your family, as Luigi would say. Okay. How was your cousin's wedding, Imran?
It was exhausting, fun. I went to Florida for my cousin's wedding. It was pretty great. Shout out to my cousin Omar and Hannah for getting married. All right. So we're in Orlando, the Mehndi ceremony. They called me up, improvised. They're like, all right, where's Imran? Please come up here. And I'm like, no way. I need to mentally prepare for something like that. It was an Egyptian Indian wedding. And so that part of the Mehndi was going to be Desi. So they wanted me to explain what the Mehndi ceremony was. And what do you think I brought up? I brought up Chai After Dark because of that episode with Haldi Huma, that whole thing that we went through. I finally knew the actual symbolic meanings behind not only the variations, but also the names of the Haldi ceremony, the Mehndi ceremony, the Mayu, the Uptum. Like it was all there. And it was such perfect timing that I was able to talk to. Obviously, I had put up a Google like image and I was like reading all the Google stuff as well for the symbolic gestures because it was a little different. And I also talked to my sister and my aunt. I was like, what does this mean? They didn't even know half the stuff I was saying, by the way. They were just doing it because it's tradition. They just do it because it was habit. They didn't really know what the symbolic meaning behind it was. So I went through that, and they also learned a little bit from it. Obviously throwing in some jokes, but I did mention the podcast. I did have a couple of people come up to me to ask where could they find the podcast. I did not. Omar did listen in Hana. They listened to the Harold and Kumar episode.
nice.
I didn't get their feedback just yet.
Well, that's hella crazy. These newlyweds on their like honeymooning were like, let's listen to this.
He sent me the picture. Maybe I'll put that picture in the next newsletter description, being like this. They were listening to that specific episode. But we cupped it over. It went really well in that regard. I didn't have to MC again. I did do the dance. There was a lot of pelvic thrusting the following day at the reception. And towards the end, people were dropping like flies because the norovirus was taking off in Florida. I got back last Thursday, and then I was knocked out for 24 to 48 hours. So make sure you wash your hands. It's highly contagious, et cetera, et cetera. But that was pretty good. Outside of that, it was pretty good.
Nice. That sounds awesome.
You didn't focus on the thrusting enough.
Oh, should I? Well, no, that's,
I think
I'm just teasing. It's a tease for the paid feed, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You usually tease before you thrust. I get it.
Damn.
It's called never mind.
You're setting yourself up, man.
This also ties in with Welcome to Chippendales. And Shabnam, here we go.
Okay. In this episode, it starts out where Otis is cruising around LA in his car, and he gets to the club in time for a huge delivery of all of these boxes. And inside them are the monthly calendar of the guys, which we talked about last time, where Steve was shooting the calendar in his backyard. So Otis looks at all of the months of the calendar and he's like flipping through, trying to find himself featured, and he seems disappointed. So Ray comes out and sees Otis, and together they decide to bring the boxes up to Steve, aka Somen's office. So Steve tells them there's more pre-orders than they expected, and they're all super excited at the calendar's success. So then Denise walks into Steve's office and tells Otis he needs to help one of the other dancers with choreography. And she can't do it because she's busy with a whole variety of other tasks, including washing G-strings. And her plate is overflowing with all of these tasks because Nick has disappeared. So Ray asks if she's heard from Nick, and she says no. So Ray says he hopes Nick is okay, and Steve says, I don't. That man has abandoned us. I could kill him. And Denise responds, not if I do first, before she like rushes off to wash the G-strings.
Kind of a precursor to maybe some potential twists and turns. Who knows?
Yeah.
Let's keep watching.
Yeah. So then we switch to Nick in New York, schmoozing with two old white men at this like fancy bar lounge. He tries to sell them on an erotic cabaret for women, the most beautiful boys you've laid your eyes on. He says, and I call it U.S. Mail. Think of a hot, scantily clad man with a sign that says U.S. Mail. We've got your package. And they start laughing. They think he's kidding. And he tells them, no, there's a club in LA that does this. It's called Chippendales, but the New York version will be bigger, better, more chic, have more famous people coming in. And they think it sounds sleazy. And he tries even harder selling them on it, that it's going to be classy, but they're just like, whatever, they don't bite.
Those were his Broadway buddies. Seems like these are the people that got him the Unicorn Tales Emmy. And they were like, oh, we'll get you back to New York. But then once he said, hey, I want to pitch dicks in front of women, they were like, nah, we're cool. Like, he got rejected pretty hard.
Yeah, it seems like it. That's true. They probably were unicorn tail hookups. So, meanwhile, at Chippendales, Otis feels the sting of not being in the calendar as the men that are in it are getting so much more attention. Finally, Steve asks Otis what's wrong because he kind of sees that Otis is kind of like not really that happy. And Otis says he's upset that he's not in the calendar. So Steve tells Otis it's one thing for women to enjoy his dancing in the privacy of the club, but that Steve thinks there's a subset of white women that wouldn't buy the calendar because they wouldn't want a picture of a shirtless black man hanging in their home in the view of their husband.
This is
And
crazy.
Otis says, yeah. Otis is like, this isn't Mississippi or Alabama in 1967. And Steve says, not a day goes by where I don't experience some form of racism in the city. I assume it's the same for you. And Otis is like, yeah, I guess. I just didn't expect it from you. And then Steve says, you can't take this personally. This is just business. And in business, there's only one color that matters. Do you know what color it is? And then Otis, like disappointingly, is like green. And then Steve says, green, that's right.
Looking up like the era and the time frame and knowing what we know about society these days, we think obviously that's crazy to us that that sort of discrimination is happening, but that's taking place in the early 80s, late 70s. And looking up California discrimination laws, those started taking fold in the late 50s, early 60s. And then civil rights, women coming into the fold. I just had on some meme pages, I think the first women bartenders in California were happening in the late 70s even. So these types of things were all kind of taking place slowly. And for that sort of integration or other businesses having to take fold, I think like these types of, I mean, they're rampant, obviously. And we'll know more later in this episode, but it kind of sets that up because for me to like research on, okay, this time and era, that stuff is going to be happening a lot. Like how Otis is going to be left out. We hear about it. We see about I think when we start our own business, we don't care about the audience of their race, color, and creed. But it's very interesting and telling to see how Steve is running his business with Otis being a black man. I'd be totally on Otis's side. I'd be like, yeah, you get how I feel. I get how you feel.
He wants to have a classy business. And I was doing a little background research on Steve's past, and there was a former employee that did an interview on 2020 or something, and he was like, yeah, Steve wanted a classy business. That's all that mattered. He wanted a classy business, and to Steve, classy meant white.
Yeah, I could see that.
Well, and that's later in this episode, right? Also, we get that's a perfect like setup to the multiple scenes we see throughout the episode.
Yeah, but I mean, it really annoyed me. Like, this is like brown on black crime, right? And it's just as the season goes on, you see he doesn't like that Nick's getting attention, but it's because Nick is doing this. Nick's a gay guy doing choreography. That's who should be like the face of this, right? And Steve wants to be the face of it, and it's like, how can you be the face of it? You're not the face of it. Just accept that you're not the face of it. And he should be working on the business side of stuff, and he should be working with people like Otis, but he's just like shitting on Otis.
It's kind of weird, like we're about a quarter, I guess we're 10 minutes into the episode of what Shubnam discussed. I don't know what Steve does all day because Irene is handling the books and Nick is handling the dancers and the choreography. Denise is hanging out with Nick and doing all the costumes, design, everything. And then they have a few other employees that are running around doing stuff. He just kind of stands there.
I am the boss. You are my employee.
I am the boss. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
just like
exactly.
yelling. Like it's like a classic like warehouse scene where the employees are on the bottom and the boss is standing on top, just like with his hands out, just overlooking like his entire minions. Like that's how Steve is. Like he doesn't do anything anymore.
Don't you think that's a Desi thing? Like, I feel like there's certain toxicity that's accepted in each culture, and in American white culture, like it's a peer pressure kind of toxicity. I feel like is accepted, but then in Desi culture, what's accepted is like if you're successful, you get to shit on the people below you. I feel like that's like an accepted Desi toxicity, and that's what he does.
Yeah, he gets pretty deep, right? This episode keeps going. Everything we're talking about, every element intensifies throughout this episode.
Yeah. So then we see all these white women lined up to buy the calendar for $5. The women are enjoying autographs from the dancers in the calendar, writing their initials on the dancers' abs with their lipstick, getting kisses, etc. And of course, like Otis is totally left out of this, which sucks. So Steve checks in with the owner of the bookstore that he sold a bunch of calendars to kind of see how the calendars are doing in the bookstore. And the owner, an older white man, tells Steve the calendar is doing so well that he'll buy as many as Steve can get made. And Steve's like 200, and the guy's like, as many as you can get made. And Steve's like 500, and he's like, as many as you can get. And Steve's just like, whoa. So then we head back to New York at that classy lounge bar where we see Nick again. But now he's just drinking at the bar alone, disappointed over those men not taking his idea seriously. So he starts just like listening to the entertainment, and there's a man singing a Broadway style song accompanied by a piano player. So the song is about having maybe waited too long, and Nick kind of is like listening intently, and the singer kind of notices him, and they hold eye contact, and you can just tell it's like bow chicka wow wow.
Oh, I knew what was about to happen.
Knowing
Yeah.
Nick, we all knew what was
Pretty
gonna
graphic.
happen.
Nick's a horny guy.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
guy's starring Andrew Rannells. He's Tony nominated from the Book of Mormon, and he was on Girls. He's also funny,
Oh.
so he has the pipes and can sing. So that was definitely on display. I don't think that's lip sync or dubbed from some other singer. It was definitely him singing.
Wow, that's cool. So after the song ends, the singer comes over to Nick and they start chatting. Nick says the song is so romantic. The man disagrees and they start debating. Then the man ends the conversation with, I don't want to fight. And Nick says, I don't want to fight either. And then they start kissing and they go hook up, and it's wild. So after they finish, they do some pillow talk.
Yada, yada, yada.
It's wild.
Okay, and then
Moving on.
Yeah.
it's wild. Yeah, it was I don't know. I didn't really understand the position because it seemed like we've talked about this in the past, but it was. I don't think it was super
man.
accurate. Imran likes details like answering machines and stuff. So just this
I thought
skin
that
on
too.
skin action was a little. I wasn't as entirely sure where things were.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, but good for them because it seemed like both dudes were having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, what did they do after they were done?
They talk about. So they do some pillow talk, and we learn that the guy's name is Bradford. And Nick tells him about Nick's ex-wife and that she's this famous person, Jennifer O'Neill. I don't know who that is, but the name sounds familiar. I feel like I should know, but I didn't look it up.
Jennifer O'Neill had, get this, 9 spouses. So this is like rivaling Elizabeth Taylor in the ranks of that. And she's a Brazilian American author and model. Nick DeNoia was married to her from 1975 to 1976.
Was he
So
the
you're
first
saying
one?
I have a chance.
Was he her first husband?
It looks like from here, 1, 2, 3, number 3. He was number 3 on the list.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to be number 10.
She's 76 years old.
She's probably like 75.
She's 76 years old.
So what?
All right. You do you, boo.
Sameem's like, I've tried 30 years younger. I should try 30 years older now. I'm just kidding.
Hey, roll the dice. You never know.
Oh, man.
You walked into that one.
This soup is too warm. This soup is too cold. I'll get it just right next time.
Yeah. You'll find the baby bear of women. Anyway, okay, where was I? Shit.
All over the place.
So they talk about to what extent they've come out. Nick says only his good friends really know. And then Bradford says he's always pretty much been out, that he told kids in elementary school on the playground that his mom was Coco Chanel, and they like laugh about that. So Nick ends up telling Bradford about trying to bring Chippendales to New York. And turns out Bradford has actually heard of Chippendales because he has a sister who lives in Pasadena. And Bradford says, so you're going to bring Chippendales to New York? And Nick says, no, it's going to be bigger and better. Then the guy says, why not bring Chippendales? And Nick says because he can't work with Steve. And Bradford tells him having something that people heard of is really rare. And he tells Nick not only is he right about this, but he's also very rich. So Nick decides, okay, maybe he should give Bradford a chance on helping him bring Chippendales to New York. And they hook up again in the excitement of Bradford's richness. And then back in LA, Steve heads to the printing shop where he tries to get 10,000 calendars printed. And the owner of the print shop tells him that's going to take weeks because he has other customers. So then Steve gets this idea and he says, what if you didn't? And he basically decides to buy the print shop, which I think is also this kind of like nostalgic thing because his dad owned a print shop. And so he's like kind of all over the place.
That's a
Like
good
he doesn't feel
connection.
like that
I forgot
emotionally
about that
stable
connection.
anymore.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The printing press thing, he bought it. And then I looked it up. He actually did buy it in the 80s.
Yeah.
In real life, too. But yeah, Daddy must have been so proud, right? Printing press and dicks.
I thought it was a boss move, obviously, but knowing what we know about what he's been doing without consulting the team, like I'm the boss, whatever I say goes, like it's messed up. And so going through that route, but I thought it was a boss move. Hey, if it's flying off the shelves, why not? Right? You're trying to get the product to the consumer, and you're going to have this yearly with fresh new bodies. Like it's not going to end. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
It was a pretty good move without, you should have consulted your team, obviously, just so you can move around. But
it just seems like he's doing a lot of things single-handedly, and like he just seems like he's being a little erratic, right? Like you feel like, okay, he feels like a little bit erratic, like he's doing things kind of just on a whim as opposed to like thinking things through a bit more, you know.
I mean, what can he really do other than expand, right? Like you can't do anything in the club that you're already not doing. He's already making money off alcohol. He's already making money off whatever tips and stuff. So
the margins on this have to be pretty great, I don't really know too.
Yeah, so that's probably why that's why Nick was saying that Steven won't let him open something in New York, and his little friend is saying, "Who cares? Just do it. Like let's open in New York and fuck Steve."
Yeah. So meanwhile, Denise is doing the most, trying to get the dancers' costumes together. Nick calls Denise, who is shocked to hear from him. He tells her the idea of opening a Chippendales in New York. And he says it's the best of both worlds, where he gets the benefit of the name, but he's 3,000 miles away. She says Steve is a psycho control freak, and he's not going to hand over opening Chippendales in New York to someone else, especially someone he deeply mistrusts, like Nick. So she reminds him of how much money it would cost. And then he tells Denise the money is not an issue because he has a backer, aka Bradford Barton. And Denise tells him to come back here and do his fucking job, and she hangs up on him. But you can tell the conversation kind of got her thinking, and she's like, wow, is this like legit? Because she's kind of tired of Steve too, I think. And so that night, the dancers do a number to Super Freak, and it's pretty much a solo number with Otis, but he's not really enthusiastic because he's basically playing a pimp, like a stereotypical caricature of a pimp.
Yeah, and the guy that announces him, he's like, the freakiest freak, the pimp who will make you limp, the daddy with the caddy. And then Otis comes out.
And he comes out to Super Freak.
And then he comes out to Super Freak, yeah. And that's literally how they introduced him. Pimp will make you limp.
You could see I like Otis as a character and the actor himself, because you could actually see the emotion he goes through from the beginning of this episode, and especially the Super Freak day. He's like, I am tired. You know he's tired. Like, oh man, I feel you. You're going to quit soon, aren't you?
Yeah. He does the dance and like collects his money, and he walks off stage with, like you're saying, Imran, like super low morale. And at the same time, Irene and Steve are in the back of the club at the merch shop, and Irene yells over the music to Steve, women love these calendars. And he's like, I know, women love to know the date and naked men. And I'm just like, what the hell? He's like a dummy. He's like a smart businessman who knows how to save money, but he just like stumbled into this, and he's just kind of like a dummy with regards to like male stripping, which isn't a bad thing to be a dummy at, I suppose. But
Are you saying backgammon wasn't going to make any money? And naked men
His
or
backgammon
naked
club.
people were? Oh my gosh.
yeah, exactly.
Backgammon.
Yeah. Then he takes Irene to his office and he tells her he bought the printing press. And she's upset that she wasn't consulted, but he assures her the numbers work. And he says, I'm the king and you're my queen. And this softens her and she goes along with it. And I'm just like, oh God, this asshole.
So, but I know. I mean, how much do you think it was? She asked him, and then he never responds. So, I mean, 50 grand. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know.
They said he was doing $8 million a year on receipts from the club.
How much?
Which means he was probably doing more.
Yeah, of course, it's all cash.
Yeah,
that's all profit.
Oh, $8 million in profit.
The dancers, right? Well, $8 million in receipts, but then you got to pay rent.
Yeah.
You got to pay everyone, right? So he's not pocketing anything near that. But it was probably much more than 10 mil. But then he wasted all the money because then you see his house throughout the episode, and it's like this palatial mansion in LA.
Yeah,
I just feel like these episodes. Yeah, he's looking. You see it in his eyes. This episode and the next episode. If I look in his eyes, that's where I see his acting versus his voice, which kind of takes me out a little bit. His yelling kind of takes me out a little bit. Do I see a little bit of Dinesh from Silicon Valley? Yes, I do see that. So that takes me out a little bit. But wearing those glasses and seeing in his eyes the struggle or pain and things that he's chasing, I could see that in his eyes when watching this series, especially this episode and the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, you're right. He seems very sad, and it's not something that you can just portray through the glasses. Like, his best acting skill in this series, at least, is portraying himself as kind of a pathetic, sad man, right? Like, he has everything. He can't be happy. His mom even told him, like, what did you need all this for? And it just kind of goes into, like, personification of what we talk about sometimes, keeping up with the Joneses. They think like these houses and this cash is going to make them happy, but then he starts lusting for power, right, throughout the episode.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it progresses. Like, every bad trait that he had, all of this is just like making him bubble up.
Yeah.
I feel like he's taking on, like, he has a lot of Desi toxic traits, and then he's like taking on a lot of like American toxic traits. So he has like the toxicity from both cultures just like brewing in him. And it's like a powder keg.
And I kept thinking that this episode was it's not like this specific episode, but I started thinking about this episode as the beginning of his villain era, right? So he's starting to brew up and starting to become that villain. Because you talked about like, I'll kill him. No, I'll kill him. Like, maybe it's a joke, maybe it's not. We don't know. But that is kind of like, again, in his eyes as well. I was like, something's coming up behind your eyes. Okay, I can see that. So that's something.
Yeah, and the fact that he's not telling Irene about the print shop until he already does it. Like these little things, right? Where it's like he's becoming more and more of an asshole.
Well, this is the next scene, right? It's table for two. He walks into this is the direct scene from Otis being upset that he's still putting on a good show, and then it cuts him. He walks in and he's like, look what I brought you, to Irene. And Irene's like, what is this? Like, it's a fancy restaurant. And I think he just expected her to be like completely floored. And but his interaction with the host right now is,
I think that's
it was
the
awesome.
point of villain. The villain, beginning of the villain era right there was for me.
Yeah, because his whole thing is he is so enamored by status and wealth and that kind of thing. And he expects that she should value that above all too. But I think she's kind of just like a regular person who happens to have money now, as opposed to like him, who that's his entire, like,
it's a self-worth.
Yeah, that's his self-worth.
She's still humble.
That's what he's going to consider himself.
Yeah. So the man at the reception basically tells them that they have to have a membership because this is some kind of a country club. And so he's like, how do I get a membership? I'm willing to apply. I'm willing to pay. And the guy is like, the membership requires a sponsorship from an existing member. So Steve starts getting pissed and he asks if there's anyone with brown skin as a member. And it turns into this like tense exchange where like Steve is accusing the guy of being racist, which he's probably right. And Steve gets super pissed and almost tells the guy to like shove the country club application up his ass. But before he can get that out, Irene rushes him away and she yells back, "Shame on you," to the receptionist. And then she reprimands Steve by saying Steven to him, which is really weird because that's not even his real name. And she made it like a longer name, like she's calling him his full name. So I thought that was weird. Yes, not even his name.
So she doesn't call him Somen. Yeah, Showman.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gets up in the guy's face and the guy's just like, he's like, "What about the table right there?" He's like, "No, that's for members." "What about that table right there?" He's like, "That table's for 4 people." So I thought what Steven was, now I'm calling him Steven. I thought what Steve was going to do was like, "Okay, I'll pay for 4. Give me that table." But he didn't get that far. So a Desi guy will never double pay. His only point will come from like, anger and words. He'll never like throw money to resolve an issue like that. Like, because dude, you're at a fucking fancy club. You could have pulled out a couple 20s that you got from Otis's thongs, like you had it in your pocket.
This is where you tie in.
You would never do it.
You're tying in with throwing money at something like that versus throwing money at the printing press, right? He's like, this I need because of the Chippendales. It brings me fame and all that stuff. Where he wants to be famous. He wants to meet famous people. He wants to be living that opulent life that he's been working for. And he'll be racially profiled at this restaurant, which is like, come on, there's an Otis too. But why are you racial? It was such a maddening experience for me that what he was doing to Otis, those guys are doing to him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's because he thought when he saved all that money at the gas station and he started this business and then the business became successful, like eventually he'll have enough money to where people will have to respect him, even if he's like a dorky immigrant, and they have to respect him as being cool. And basically that he could basically be a cool white guy in Hollywood if he had enough money. And he realized, no, you can't. Racism is just racism, and it's like, I don't know. That was weird.
And Mr. Singh, on the first episode, the gas station owner, look at the contrast between Showman and Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh was like super nice. I understand he paid him minimum wage for like 7 years by that point, but he was like, "I'm going to promote you." He fed him lunch, but it's like, that's way more respect than Steve has showed any of his employees, So he didn't learn shit from Mr. Singh. And then he got all fucking up in Mr. Singh's face and like, not rudely, but he was like, "No, I quit because I'm going to go run my own business.
Because I'm better than this, basically.
Because I'm better than this." But now he's like turned into this like basically egomaniac that is just,
Yeah. So then we cut back to the print shop that Steve bought, and we see that he renamed it to Banerjee Printworks. And he looks at the newly printed calendar pages, and we feel, again, like this nostalgia from his childhood of like his new business colliding with the roots of his family business from India. So that night we see Denise getting the guys ready at the club for the next show. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Nick shows up. So she walks up to... Yeah. She walks up to him and she slaps him across the face, and then she pauses and she gives him a big hug. And
how long was he gone?
It's unclear.
My note here was, why is Denise crying? How long was he gone? Like, because it didn't seem like he was gone all that long. I guess Steve bought a printing press in that time and printed more calendars, but who knows?
I think like in the beginning of the episode, didn't they say like a couple months? So like maybe 3 months or something, I'm thinking.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. It does seem like,
which is a long time to leave a job, right?
And not get fired.
Totally.
Not get called.
Denise,
I mean, I
like,
guess Showman was calling him, right? He just never picks up the phone.
Yeah. And he didn't call him back. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So then we see him walk into Steve's office, and he announces to Steve, without letting Steve get a word in edgewise, that he is opening a Chippendales in New York City, and he's going to run it. And if Steve has a problem with it, he'll instead open a competing club called US Mail, MALE. And before
He was still going with it. He was
Steve-
still going with it.
Yeah. And before Steve can respond, he says, "That's what I've been doing these past few weeks." Oh, I guess it's weeks. It's only weeks.
Well, that could be a couple months.
Yeah, that's true. And he also tells Nick that he has Broadway investors who are loving the idea. He says, either way, Steve can work with Nick or Nick will become his competition and fight him every step of the way. And he walks out of Steve's office and Steve is like in a tizzy.
His Broadway investors said no to him. The guy that's giving him the cash, if we didn't make it clear earlier, is the guy that
hooked up with. This part of the story is the commonalities between Nick and Steve. Both of them are, whoever they're talking to, whether it's business or something, there's the real story that we see. And then whenever they come back to Chippendales, they're both hiding the real deal of what's happening. So Nick comes in all hot. Like, he can't come in saying, hey, I got this idea. I want to run this. I got a backer for it. No, he doesn't lay everything out. Like, Steve doesn't do this either. And so he just says, you have to do this or this, 2 options. I'm out. You can either collaborate with me or compete with me. One or the other, I'm out. So yeah, that was very, when I saw that, I was like, that's very Steve-like as well. Just trying to be an alpha dog. Everybody's trying to be that alpha dog, and you can't really have that.
Yeah. And Nick has a big ass ego too, right? Like, everybody has a big ego. But the thing that they like kind of failed to realize is they both really need each other, because Nick is not a good like businessman, accounting person. I'm sorry, but like having someone be a little penny pinching at the top is probably a good thing for a business. And then Steve doesn't know shit about male stripping, so he needs Nick too. So, but they don't want to give each other their flowers, as Imran would say.
But I do feel like they could have resolved their issues. It didn't seem like all that crazy. It's just the egos butting heads. And I actually wrote that note down, and I was like, they could have just said, hey, you take care of this, you take care of that. But I'm getting a little bit ahead because there's some other scenes in the next few episodes. It just gets kind of wild. They just hate each other, like essentially what it comes down to. Even when they try to be like nice and playful,
they obviously didn't take business management class, that's for sure.
Well, they need therapy.
They need therapy.
I guess that too.
Well, I'm assuming all these dudes did. Yeah, back then, like these guys are pretty egotistical. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the next scene, we see Steve telling Irene that Nick is back, and he's transferring Nick to his best idea yet, a New York Chippendales. So again, we start to see like him emotionally unraveling. Like, he can't be freaking honest about anything.
Isn't she gonna know? Isn't she gonna know that it was Nick's idea? Like, there's only 4 sort of operators, right? Nick, Denise, Irene, and Steve. And he was like, we're going to go to New York. We're going to open our best club ever. It was just kind of strange. Isn't Nick just going to be like, no, Steven didn't even know about it?
Yeah, I don't think he thinks that far ahead. I think he's just becoming like an egomaniac, you know? And then at the same time, we see Nick in the next scene telling Denise that he made Steve an offer he couldn't refuse. Like, he's a freaking godfather over there. Yeah. So these guys are both just, their egos are like inflating and inflating.
Yeah, that alone, even that dialogue is the same thing that Steve said, right? Nick and Steve were saying the same in 2 different like scenes, 2 different areas. Made you an offer, couldn't refuse. Made him an offer, you can, like, they're both vying for the same thing. Why couldn't they work together, right? This is the same goal. And so that's what I enjoy about that part of the story and the plot. Like, that's kind of like cool. If it makes you feel different things, like it's making me feel frustrated that they're doing this. And so that's a good story to me.
So then we see Steve go to the printing press and admire the tens of boxes of calendars in the hallway. And suddenly he kind of hears Ray and Otis talking in a room off the hallway. So he opens a door and he finds Ray developing pictures he took of Otis, and Otis admiring them. And Steve asks what they're doing, and Otis says casually, I'm making a calendar. And Ray says to Otis, you said he, meaning Steve, was cool with this. And he's like, Ray starts freaking out because he doesn't want Steve to get mad at him for doing something he shouldn't have been doing. And then Steve says, you guys are making a competing calendar. And Ray starts defending himself and like, being like a little kiss ass. And Steve tells him to shut up and leave. And Otis and Steve talk. And Otis tells Steve he's trying to follow him and not go against him. And Otis asks Steve, have you ever thought of having 2 black dancers? And Steve doesn't seem like he wants that. And Otis says, I know, because 1 black dancer is good for business, but 2 black dancers might attract the wrong element. And Steve says, you can't take this stuff personally. And Otis says, yeah, I know. It's just business. So he tells Steve, good luck, Steve, and shakes his hand. And Steve says, where are you going? You're not fired. And Otis says, yeah, I know. I quit.
Damn.
And
we lost Otis? Damn.
He was the best
Otis
dancer
walks
there
out.
was.
That was the best dancer / character.
Yeah, this show's getting really interesting, but like, I'm with Otis. I'm going to walk out when Otis walks out.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I was like, I don't know if I want to watch this if Otis ain't in it. Come on. Like,
really knew toxic environment when he saw one. He's like, I'm trying to learn the business.
Oh,
and
totally.
he's like, dude, this is too much of a mess. I'm out.
Yeah. He doesn't let him have a friend. Like, to this day, when you watch comedy movies from the early 2000s, mid 2000s, early 2010s, there's always a token black guy. Like, even to this day, it's solo black guy in white controlled media. I'm being a little facetious, everyone. Like, don't get all crazy on me. But back then, he was like, what, you can't have 2 black guys on the calendar? And Steve was like, no, you can't. Like, but to this day, is it any different? Like, like, of course, there's a lot of black owned media and a lot of movies and music out there. But it's like, in certain films, it is that one token character, right? So it's not all that different back then versus today. This was early 80s, by the way, by the time this Otis scene happens. So it's not mid 70s anymore.
Yeah, I mean, good for Otis. Like, Otis is just like, you guys are totally full of shit. He started looking up to Steve and wanting to learn business and being like, probably like, oh, this is another minority, an immigrant. Like, this will be somebody that I can like respect and that will respect me. And it turns into like a completely like piece of shit. So
hide the silverware.
Yeah, seriously. So then Nick sees Otis as he's walking out and yells out to him, hey, Otis, come here. Did you hear the good news? And Nick and Denise tell Otis that they're opening a club in New York and that he can split his time between LA and New York. And he says, nah, I'm done. And they're shocked. And they try to convince him that things will be different. And he says, no, thanks. I just want to do my own thing. And he walks out. And on his way, And on his way out, he walks past this long line on his way home of people that are waiting outside. And in the line, there are 2 brown men, I think maybe like 1 black guy and 1 Latino guy. And they're trying to get in, but the bouncer tells them they need a membership card. The bouncer then lets in 2 white guys behind them with the membership card. And the 2 brown men ask the bouncer, like, how can we get this membership card? We're willing to pay. And the bouncer tells them it's a process. So Steve is just...
became a plantation owner.
Yeah. Yeah. He's just like went complete country club racist on Chippendales. It's just like, he's a shady ass dissy guy who like only sees green and he thinks he's going to get rich like
green.
this.
Fame and green. That's it.
Yeah.
The American dream.
I mean, I don't know. So then we see Steve looking down on the club from the 2nd floor office of his. He goes back into his office and Ray comes in super submissive, like a little bitch, apologizes, saying
Totally.
Look at the why let's emphasize.
He
was. Yeah.
He came in really sub, like it was amazing.
Yeah. And he apologizes, saying he should have known that Steve wouldn't have been cool with the calendar. And he says, I ain't no boss, but I seen enough movies to know when you're a king, there's a lot of snakes in the grass to take you down and steal your crown. And it's just like, dude, why don't you just like sleep with him at this point?
I mean, what does he do? He gets on his knees right after that. Right after, what are you talking about? And then he
Yeah,
kisses his hand and he's like, I pledge loyalty. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And Steve's eyes, like his eyes glimmered with power.
Yeah, it's so
You
crazy.
see it in the
Like, I feel
eyes.
like this scene must have been a little campy, but it's like Steve was loving every second of this. And he's like, yeah, you don't have to worry about me going against you and like all this stuff. And it's this like dramatic ass scene. It's just crazy. And this is what Imran was saying. This was like the initiation of Steve into his villain era. Full on.
Whew.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
That was the end scene, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally right.
They showed that scene in the intro title sequence,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh, that's an interesting scene. Like, is it fake or real or whatever it is? Because they have a lot of those images flashing through the title sequence, and then when I saw it for real in the end, I was like, ooh, okay, this is the villain era showman. And it's not like his workers are not giving it to him. This dude pledging his loyalty is
they're
feeding
giving
his
it to him.
ego completely, and so he loves that. And so we'll see more of that later.
We're halfway in, right? So we still have 4 more episodes. And these series are always obvious, right? When you watch a miniseries, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, True Detective, whatever it is, it sets the scene. And then it gets like fucking crazy in the last, like, if it's a 6th episode, then it's like the 4th gets really wild. But yeah, like I'm expecting some, beyond the hookups, as you guys call it. Like there's got to be more debauchery coming in terms of,
We've seen the
violence.
dances. We've seen the
Yeah.
business getting set up. We've seen the conflict of interests all over the place. And then now the New York dancing. So we have more conflict there. Now they're going to start buddying. That the villains are being shown. So now we get to see how that climax. We're heading towards like a episodic climax. I'm just laughing at myself.
Yeah,
Lots of climaxes.
A lot of personal climaxes so far. Now we need like an overarching
climax. Yeah.
So yeah, things get juicier.
Yeah, but I think like the 2 telling things was when, what was her name? Deborah, the playmate, she died. She was murdered in episode 1.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, okay, things are like, we never got back to that dark tone.
Still hasn't come back to that.
Yeah. So that's something. And then when Steve Schulman's mom was like, not everybody's made to be rich, like that was like, ooh, okay, like what's going on there? So
like he's forcing himself to be rich,
episodes.
Right? I need to show that I'm rich.
Yeah.
I have to be rich. Yeah, I have to be.
And like
his own.
Getting rich and staying rich are 2 different things, right? And I think he
get
can
rich
get
or die
rich.
trying. He was the original 50 Cent.
Boom. On that note.
That's all
should we
50
jingle
Cent
out of
does.
here?
Did I send you that video?
Yeah, I know what that
You
is.
saw that?
Yeah. That with 50 other videos, but yeah.
That's all 50 Cent did in his Vegas
I don't actually
residency.
think he sent that one.
Just this.
I know, I saw that. Was
50 Cent could have been a Chippendales dancer.
No, they already got a black dancer. How did
the quota was
true.
met.
Can't be
There's only one Otis.
Yeah. Just call me Sameem Showman Sultan. Also, multiple black guys didn't exist, and the Kardashians wouldn't either. So I don't know what Steve's talking about.
Yeah, seriously.
And on that, I leave.
I take my leave.
I mean, hey, hope everybody enjoyed the new jingle that Shabnam found and recorded.
Sameem found it.
I didn't find it.
Found it, edited, all that good stuff.
That's actually Imran from when he was at USC. That was his thesis.
That's another story. And then that's how we end this episode.
This episode was produced, edited, marketed, and created by Shebnam, Captain Ron, and Sameem of Jai After Dark LLC in association with